The outcome of the paper can be summarized with this sentence: large-scale qubit control in spin-based quantum computers can be realized using a global microwave field generated off-chip. In other words, we have shown that in a spin-based quantum computer with potentially millions of qubits, it is possible to control all qubits with a single magnetic field that is generated by a cavity placed outside of the qubit device. To our knowledge, this is the first ever demonstration of off-chip electron spin resonance in a nanoelectronic qubit device. And as I will explain later, it is an exciting solution on the way towards scalability of spin-based quantum computers. We are working on electron spin qubits in silicon MOS devices. They have proven themselves to be a strong candidate as a platform for building quantum computers. They have long coherence times, which means lots of operations can be completed before the qubits lose their information. They can operate above 1 Kelvin, so they don't necessarily require complex cryostats to reach sub-Kelvin temperatures, and there will be more cooling power to support cryogenic control electronics in the same environment that qubits are operated. And finally, they are leveraging a more than half-century-old SiMOS fabrication technology. There is a consensus in quantum computing community that we need at least thousands of qubits, if not millions, to solve real-life problems with quantum computers. Given that we have silicon CMOS chip with billions of transistors everywhere in our daily life, surely this knowledge will put silicon MOS devices ahead in the race to scale up. However, the scaling up is still a quite challenging issue. In order to run our quantum algorithms, we should implement quantum logic gates. In other words, we need to control qubits. For electron spin qubits, there are two prevalent solutions to effectively control their spin states. One of them is implementing electron spin resonance with alternating magnetic fields using on-chip transmission line. An AC current is sent to a transmission line placed near the qubits, and this creates the magnetic fields to drive the qubits. The problem with these transmission lines is that their magnetic fields are quite local. So they are fine for a few qubit devices, but in the case of thousands of qubits, we need at least tens or hundreds of them to make sure every qubit is fed by sufficient AC magnetic fields. This would both occupy a significant chip real estate and cost a considerable heat load. And on top of that, this would also require lots of high frequency coaxial lines that goes all the way from the microwave sources to our qubit device, which is another layer of complexity for our already complex cryogenic setup. The other qubit control method is electric dipole or electrically driven spin resonance. For electron spin qubit devices, a nanomagnet is placed near the qubits. This nanomagnet creates a magnetic field gradient so that the qubits can be electrically controlled with AC signals directly applied to gate electrodes. But the same nanomagnet that facilitates EDSR also causes decoherence, decreasing the lifetime of the qubits. This method also requires multiple high-frequency control lines, which has the same problems we described above. There is actually a solution for the scalability of controlling spin qubits, and it is more than 20 years old. Bruce Kane from UNSW has proposed his vision called global control in this Nature paper in 1998. The idea is to have an always-on magnetic field effective over all qubits in the device. Whenever a qubit needs to be controlled, its frequency brought in resonance with the global control field via potentials applied to the local spins. It is brought out of the resonance the same way if it's not desired to be controlled. As a result, the whole chip can be operated via single microwave source. No direct high frequency current passes through the chip. Therefore, chip design is simplified and heating is reduced significantly. The idea of global control is brilliant, but its implementation is not straightforward. That's why there hasn't been any demonstration of off-chip spin control, global control yet. Here is one idea from 6 years ago. The device is placed inside a 3-dimensional microwave cavity so that the entire chip is supplied with the largest and most uniform magnetic field possible. However, this approach has some side effects. The resonator might be affected by metal gates and bond wires on the device, and the device is exposed to large AC fields that could interfere with the qubit readout and cause heating through photon-assisted tunneling. So this idea does not seem practical enough to achieve global control. Another issue to think about is the material of the cavity resonator. We want to produce highest AC magnetic field with as low microwave power applied to the cavity as possible, so that we can drive our qubits fast enough without heating the device with the microwave signals. The relation between the magnetic field generated and the input power applied is modeled with this equation here, in which C is the conversion ratio and P is input signal power. So we are after a material with high conversion ratio, and the conversion ratio is known to vary with cavity quality factor, cavity frequency, and microwave mode volume. Assuming the frequency can be controlled with the dimensions of the cavity, what we need from the candidate material is to have a high Q factor and a low mode volume. Given the issues summarized in last 2 slides, we offer the following solution to achieve global control in spin qubit devices. Dielectric resonator on top of the nanoelectronic device. The dielectric material we have chosen is potassium tantalate, which can have quality factors up to 60,000 and is known to have low mode volumes. Therefore, it has very high conversion ratio. We place the resonator on top of our silicon device and aim to globally control our qubits with the microwave magnetic field generated with the dielectric resonator. We also place a thin sapphire spacer in between to form some sort of isolation between the resonator and the chip so that they don't disrupt each other's operation. At this stage, I would like to share two short animations summarizing the contribution of our approach. This one depicts the current way of controlling electron spin qubits. An on-chip microwave line generates a localized magnetic field to drive the qubits in its vicinity. However, the farther qubits are away from the line, the harder it gets to control them. As the number of qubits scale up, the number of transmission lines should also be proportionally increased, which will cause heating and design complexity issues. We, on the other hand, propose to use a single dielectric resonator placed on top of the qubits as a source of microwave magnetic field. This would create a global field that is potentially effective all over the chip. Therefore, the qubits can be globally controlled with a single microwave source, which would solve a significant hurdle for the scalability of semiconductor spin qubits. We then tested the idea with a planar silicon MOS electron spin qubit device. The cartoon on the left shows how we stacked up the chip, spacer, and the resonator. The photo in the middle is taken from the actual setup of our experiment. You can see the black silicon chip and the false colored red dielectric resonator, and again false colored 200 micrometer thick white sapphire block. The resonator at the top resonates at a given frequency by being triggered through a copper loop coupler, which we can see in the device stack photo here. Before attempting to control some qubits with the resonator, we need to ensure that the resonator resonates with a good enough quality factor despite the existence of the silicon chip in its vicinity. The figure on the right shows the resonance measured in this setup. It is in fundamental mode, which generates an out of qubit plane magnetic field. Its quality factor is around 500, which is 2 orders of magnitude lower than the cases without any silicon chip. This is a serious issue that undermines the advantage of our proposed technique. So we needed to understand why this is happening. To investigate where this 2 orders of magnitude difference comes from, we first simulated our setup. James Lexsmith, the joint first author of our paper, has carried out finite element simulations in a software package called CHD Microwave Studio. This is the 3D model of the device stack we have used for the simulations with the resonator, spacer, and the silicon device. The silicon device model here has 3 regions. One of them is the yellow omics, serving as sources of electrons that flows through the channel. Another one is the blue channel stopper, used to block electron leakage currents between the omics. And the last one is simplified metal gates in gray, controlling the confinement of the electrons. In the simulations, we have reproduced the quality factor of measured resonance in the previous slide by adjusting the position of the loop antenna. Then we have run the frequency domain solver at the center frequency of the fundamental mode to see the power dissipation in various regions. The results show that overwhelming majority of the loss results from the channel stopper region, 95%, while the omics and the metallic gates have relatively little contribution. We have used these simulations to also check if the proposed design gives the expected magnetic and electric fields on the device. What we want is to have high magnetic and low electric field on the qubit plane. Here we can see the simulated electric and magnetic field profiles. The magnetic field one at the top is strongest along the central axis at this fundamental mode, and it extends outside the resonator. As for the electric field, it's more concentrated on the sides and strongly confined inside the material. After having some ideas as to why we have low Q factors, we have finally started the device measurements. Though the Q factor is not even close to what we expect, it apparently is still good enough to drive an electron spin qubit. Here is the false colored SEM of the device measured for the demonstration of ESR with dielectric resonator. It has a single-electron transistor, SET, to be used as a charge sensor next to the actual qubit string, followed by D1 and D2 gates. There are also barrier gates tuning the coupling between either adjacent quantum dots or SET and D1 or reservoir and D2. For these measurements, the reservoir is extended to D3 by applying high voltage on D3, D4, and RG gates. D1 and D2 gates are tuned in a way to be able to see even the last electron transitions. We can see the last electron transitions in the figure on the right. All spin measurements in which electron spin resonance is demonstrated is carried out at the 4031 anti-crossing frame with this red square here. In the left panel here, we can see PSP and latch readout regions found at these anti-crossings. By following the pulse sequence A to D, the spin state is intended to be initialized as T minus and read out in the latch region. An SET current histogram produced by repeating this sequence multiple times forms 2 well-separated curves representing singlet and triplet states. For electron spin resonance measurements, the pulse sequence also includes the voltage configuration E. The complete sequence followed is shown in this pulse scheme. The 2D color map on the right is the result of repeating this pulse scheme with different ESR frequencies and DC magnetic fields. There are 2 ESR frequency peaks shifting proportional to DC magnetic fields, along with a third unexpected one, possibly indicating a parasitic dot having a spin state controlled by the ESR drive. This result is a strong evidence of electron spin resonance for both dots. The strengths of uppermost 2 ESR peaks also show a strong dependence on their resonance frequency. Bottom right panel here examines this behavior in a bit more detail. The peak depth of the second ESR peak here, PB, is plotted as a function of its qubit resonance frequency with the blue circles in this panel. Gray trace just show previously shown S11 results of the resonator. There is a strong correlation between the S11 results and the peak depth distribution. This is a very clear evidence of electron spin resonance being driven by the dielectric resonator itself. I would like to emphasize that, to our knowledge, this is the first ever demonstration of off-chip spin resonance in a nanoelectronic device. It proves that global control is possible in spin qubit devices. The natural next step is to demonstrate coherent control, in other words, Rabi oscillations. Since this is a natural silicon device, we couldn't achieve fast enough drive to beat the coherence times. So in future experiments, we plan to repeat these measurements in a device with isotopically purified silicon. We don't think there is any reason for us not to observe Rabi oscillations and beyond. In fact, there is a recent work also from UNSW that shows coherent control with dielectric resonators in an NV-centered device already. As mentioned before, our measured Q factor is 2 orders of magnitude lower than the material limit of potassium tantalate resonators. This means the required microwave power to be applied to the loop antenna can be approximately 10 times lower than it currently is, which potentially will help keeping the microwave pulses longer without heating the device and make the global control closer to achieve. The resonator Q factor can be improved by decreasing the undesired power dissipations on the different regions of the silicon device. In other words, by having some modifications in the device fabrication. Another room for improvement could be the minimization of unwanted stray electric fields by designing a shielded loop coupler. This would protect the device from those electric fields and facilitates achieving more coherent control. Finally, I would like to acknowledge all the co-authors' generous contributions to get this paper out. That's all what I wanted to talk about. Thanks for listening.